welcome everybody to the BGSS webinar today, Failed and Successful Stories with Technical Debt, as part of Leeds Digital Festival. For those of you who don't know who BGSS are, we're the UK's leading technology consultancy, and we've now got offices around the UK, Portugal and America. We will be recording today's session, and there will be the opportunity to ask questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A functionality, and we will just go through those at the end. Any that we don't get a chance to go through, we will do a follow-up after this session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Antonio Cobo, who is a delivery manager at BGSS. Over to you, Antonio.
Thanks, Karen. So let me share my screen like that everybody can see what. Good. So thank you everybody for attending the session. I'm really happy giving this session. I wanted to do it in person, but it's better to do it digitally than not doing it at all, right? So today I'm going to be sharing with you some failed and successful stories with technical debt that happened in my life. And before that, we need to find the definition of technical debt. When I was trying to find a universal definition, I did like a lot of people do right now online. I went to Wikipedia. So the definition in Wikipedia is quite accurate. Technical debt is a concept in software development that reflects the implied cost of the additional rework cost by choosing an easy solution now instead of using a better approach that could take longer. I'm nearly agreeing, but there is one caveat here. I think that sometimes we generate technical debt without choosing an easy solution. Sometimes we can generate technical debt because the solution that we are choosing is the only one we know. So we can generate technical debt without knowing it. Sometimes also, a bad code review process or a non-existing one will generate a lot of technical debt. I have worked in a lot of different companies with a lot of different processes, and I can tell you the ones that they don't have a proper code review process, we were generating a lot of technical debt. A little bit of background about myself. So I have worked in 3 different countries, Spain, France, and UK, different companies and markets. So telecom and travel industry, consultancies, and now I'm delivery manager for BGSS. I'm more focused on agile coaching and the broadest aspect of delivery management. So I'm trying to help teams to actually become better and deliver better value to their customers. So the technical debt, even from an agile coach perspective, is really important. And with all my roles, even at the beginning when I was a software developer or when I was project manager, I had to deal with technical debt. It always appeared. I didn't have, in 20 years, a project without any technical debt, because it's also about the trade-off that you do when you choose solutions, right? A bit of warning for you. I think that you've already noticed, but I'm from Spain. That means I speak really fast. Sometimes really, really, really fast. I'm getting better to pace my speed. If it's too quick, just start putting questions and answers on the Q&A saying, please slow down, and I will get a beep over there that they will let me know that is. I'm asthmatic. I don't know if any asthmatic in the audience, but most of the time it means that I'm gonna need to stay silent for some seconds to get my breathing back. And in bad days, you can actually hear my breathing on webinars, especially a lot, because the noise, sometimes the noise cancelling is not good. So it could be like I remember several years ago, a friend of mine told me, you know, Antonio, I know that you are asthmatic, but now you are project manager. And when you're breathing like that, you always remind me of someone. That's a little bit joke that I always do. It usually relaxes me, and usually helps the audience to realize that my breathing is with me all the time and I cannot stop. So from that moment, usually in my talks, people stop realizing about my breathing. So let me know later if it's the case, okay? I'm gonna start talking about a lot of different stories, like if it was a book with different chapters. But first of all, one of the key things is the misunderstanding that we can have between the business and the developers. It's really complicated sometimes to get them to speak the same language. And on my role as an agile coach or delivery manager, sometimes I need to help them translate. Because sometimes when business think, yeah, the developers are saying that the servers are a little bit overloaded, it should be okay, we can still work, right? But actually what the devs think, it's really, really a critical situation. And the fact that they don't see the same when someone is playing something is because they don't use common language. If you need to explain technical depth from a development perspective to someone from business that is not technical, it's always better to think the impact on our customers. So if you explain not doing this is going to affect the quality of the journey of our customers in order to buy something online. And it will impact negatively our brand because our sales process is going to be longer, or there's going to be waiting time in some pages. Then you are saying the impact on the money, on the revenue. And that is easy to try to put the message with the revenue and trying to explain technical depth using business words. So with all the stories that I'm going to share, always imagine that I'm the bad one, the one generating technical debt. I wasn't, or at least not all the time. But it's easier when I'm explaining things if I impersonate the one that is doing really, really bad things. And of course, any coincidence with your real life situations right now is pure coincidence. But I have a lot of feedback after this talk in other conferences that a lot of people were saying, oh, but that's my team. And it's really, really the situation we have now. So imagine a situation, it's a small city with a university. They start a business putting a development center there because it was cheaper for them to get developers from that university and not being on the big cities on that country where the salaries are really, really big. And there's a lot of competence in order to get the good developers. As they are getting only people straight from university, they needed to name some like senior developers, but they didn't have real experience, right? At that time, we had a really fixed price contract and really, really tight deadlines. And the mentality of that company, it was about saving money. So that's the reason they were putting junior developers, like senior developers, putting really, really tight deadlines. And they weren't trying to teach the junior developers to become better, right? Actually, the junior developer, it was more or less saying, you can just copy paste this code that is working, but just applying for the thing that you need to do. Of course, that was an unhappy situation. It generated a lot of technical debt for one reason, well, a lot of reasons. It was really bad teamwork because if no one was actually teaching junior developers or working as a team, there's no teamwork. And it's quite one of the keys to solve things, right? You need to teach good practice. And that's the reason of doing that is if you teach good practices to your junior developers, you may get them to become the senior developer for your company in the future, a real one. So you can invest on them. You need to get your junior developers to think and not acting like a copy-paste. If you want people to copy-paste, don't try to get junior developers, or please try to do something else. Don't develop things. And what happened here is what they gave us as the class to use as a model, it wasn't great. It was actually really poorly written. So we were generating technical debt like if it was in a factory more and more and more, because the original, it wasn't really good. Because we didn't have senior developers, we didn't have time to actually learn about it, and it was really, really complicated to develop something good. What happened there, it's the client wasn't happy. We need to redo a lot of stuff. It was really, really a loss of the money for the company, and a lot of people left the company because they weren't actually learning. And it's one of the things, of course, it was a failed story, right? One of the key things here, invest on your junior developers, teach them, make sure that they can actually think how to solve the challenges that you're giving to them, and nurture them in a way that they can become the senior developers. Another chapter, which the title, I think that you can guess that maybe it wasn't a good one, right? It's a different kind of situation, different company, or not. It was extremely optimistic deadline. So when a consultant says something like that, it means that it's impossible to do it. We had at that time a development manager that it wasn't really, really hands-on. It was more about teaching the good practices, helping the team, ensuring that the team is protected, that they feel okay, that they are learning. So it was more about the psychology than proper doing the code himself. We, for some kind of problem within the communication with the client and our company, we had to deliver something the following day. So the development manager had to actually start coding things as well, but that person was helping the others to actually finish their task first. And it was really, really late when he still needed to finish a critical part that the others wouldn't be able to do it. He stayed really, really late trying to fix it. And the only thing that he could think about it at that time, it was the deadline tomorrow. So it was desperate time, and sometimes on desperate times, we tend to do desperate measures, right? So he did a choice about writing the code not in a perfect way, but in a way that it was going to work okay for the next day. And from next week, they will fix it. So it was like, okay, let's try to do something. It's going to do okay for the client tomorrow, and we'll fix it next week. They had an issue with that. He forgot to tell anybody else that he was actually choosing a really bad solution in order to get something for the next day. So, and he didn't document it. No ticket on your tool tracking, whether it's Jira, through the box, anything. He didn't note down anything, not email. And he was hoping, okay, we deliver and we'll manage to fix it. What happened? That person got sick the very next day. A really, really long sickness. It was more than 3 weeks, that person without being able to come back to the office. The issue is the junior developers, as they were always thinking that the senior developer was always teaching them good practices and actually always caring about them. They didn't change the code of that development manager. And they started to build things on top of it with extremely optimistic deadlines, because after the demo, of course, it was a lot of things to change. The requirements changed a little bit to accommodate things for the client, and they start building on top of that. When that person finally come back 3 weeks and a half after, it was a long time, the platform and the code, it wasn't really great, and you could be surprised how bad something that it's on the base of something that is wrong and not a good code can get bigger and bigger. We had to redo a lot of things and we lost a lot of money for the company because we missed a couple of deadlines after that because we had to rework everything. The problem here, of course, no one knew that it was just a temporary fix in order to fix it properly the next day. If you are forced to choose something like that and do something quick, the key thing is communication. You need to ensure that someone else is aware of that, that it's discussed with someone else, it's documented, and you are going to deal straight away with that. If you don't tell anybody else and you are refactoring things, we might be on this situation that then there's a lot of builds on top of that, and the technical debt is growing, and the project can be a little bit messy or more than that. So always log what you're doing. If there is a choice that is a technical debt or a technical choice to review the following week, log it. You don't know whether you're going to be there the following week to explain the team. So ensure that it's email, Jira ticket, anything. Always log in, okay? Another chapter, the OUTLAW. I think I'm making the names too obvious, and you know sometimes whether it's a good or a bad thing, right? Different situation, different context, but always it's someone on the team, a developer, finding technical debt. It's willing to correct it, that is the good spirit. It's refactoring a small part without telling anyone, and actually it worked. Everything is okay, there is no problem, and that developer has fixed technical debt while doing the normal tasks that he was doing, or were developing the user story. It's like the ideal scenario for every developer. I'm finding something that is not good, I'm correcting it at the same time that I'm doing my job. It's good. It's like I don't need to tell anybody, yay, fix it, cool. And then you have the feeling of successful. It was a success story this time. However, it's not always the case to be a successful story. It happened with the same developer, always a good spirit, willing to fix and to correct technical debt, right? And thinking is going to be a small part. The problem is sometimes the application we're working on is really, really big and complicated, and maybe we don't know exactly all the application really well. So when we start, that small part is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And we are actually spending more time fixing or refactoring the technical debt than actually doing what you're supposed to be doing. And if your team is not with proper development practice, with code review, or the proper way of using branches or not using branches, and it's a little bit chaotic, the way that it's managed, you can make everybody to do a big snowball and delay everybody else and the whole team. And that, of course, it's like you are an outlaw and you are not being a team player, right? The key thing here is in both cases, he didn't discuss with the team. It was always starting with a really good starting point and the will to fix things and to do a proper code, a code that we are proud of it, because when you're doing your job, you are of it and trying to do really, really good, following all the standards and things like that, which is really good, and thinking about correct it. However, you need to discuss with the team. And then depending on the situation, you do the refactor now, or you do it maybe on the next sprint. One team that I was working on, and with the tech lead for all the teams, I was always, when I was finding things, I was like, okay, the way that we're doing here is really messy, and it's really complicated to actually modify for future requirements. If I do it normally, it's going to be probably 2 days and it's going to work. But if we try to change in a way and refactor to make it easier after that to actually modify it and to add more requirements, I might spend the whole week, but then it's going to be easier each time that we work on it. So explaining the facts, then we could make a decision together and decide, okay, we're going to refactor it now, or okay, we document it and we try to do it on the following sprint because it's really too late on this sprint and it's better to finish this and refactor on the next one, for example, right? So you don't have that feeling or being an outlaw, you're following your goodwill and you're discussing with the team. Communication again. The key thing for me is always communicate with the rest of the team and not try to go and like a cowboy, you alone trying to fix everything. Because sometimes you might forget or you don't know that what you're modifying here, there's an impact on the other part of the platform and you're actually making something else to stop working. And maybe it's an edge case of a test case that you don't have, which is another issue as well, but it may happen that you modify things and some edge cases are not covered by your test and you're making things explode, right? So always communicate with the rest of the team. The good team. 7 senior developers and a product owner. There was one team, everybody was really into new technologies. It was a challenging new product development. We could actually explore really the latest technology and trying to find ways of doing it that it might change 2 or 3 weeks later because it was really using the latest technology. The product owner was actually with a strong technical background. So all the discussions were really interesting in order to make some choices. And we had to do the regular demos to the client that it was from a big government agency. So with a lot of really important people on those demos. So a lot of tight deadlines and we had to make choices sometimes. So we had some technical debt really quick because with the newest technology, you have a lot of surprises. The way that this team managed that, because they like really defining process for the team all together and then follow it, we were using Jira and actually created a new type that it was technical debt because they wanted to ensure that each time that we were adding something, choosing the easy way now, that it was documented all the time and that we could spot clearly the tickets that they were technical debt. Having the product owner with a really strong technical background helped us a lot because we managed to actually prioritize the ticket on the backlog. We were fixing the tickets on the sprint, right? It was part of the sprint review, so it was ideal. We managed to reduce technical debt nearly straight away, and it was a good teamwork. And the communication between devs and product owner, I think probably it was the best that I had in my life. And we reduced technical debt. Sometimes it was, okay, we need to show this on this sprint, we'll fix it on the next one because we don't have time. And it was nearly like that, or maximum 2 sprints after we were already fixing things, and sometimes during the sprint, because when we found the technical debt, it was at the beginning of the sprint, and all together we managed to decide whether we could do the good choice straight away. So always communicating. It was like feeling, probably it was one of the best teams that I've ever worked when I was part of the development team. And of course, it was a successful story. And it's the ideal scenario for technical development that is really using the latest technology. It was the way that it worked really well for us. However, it doesn't mean that this is going to work for your team. I don't know the context of your team. I know the context of that team at that moment. And I want to stress it at that moment and not now. I don't know what's the context of that team now. Because it happened with the same people a couple of years later, you can have a different reactions to technical debt. We were nearly the same team. We got together a couple of years after with a similar development, right? But we had always the tech lead on that company, one that was a little bit more senior than the others, pushing back a lot of tickets of technical debt not to be on the sprint. Which sometimes, when you have a technical lead that everybody respects, it might drive this behavior to follow what the technical lead, what she's saying or what he's saying, right? Or sometimes you have a different kind of a scenario. There are some product owners that you're telling me you're going to mark every ticket that is technical debt and all the others that are user stories, so I can't prioritize the backlog. So you can have a product owner that they know more or less that the velocity of the team is 20 story points or around 5-6 items in the backlog every sprint. That person can put the technical dev tickets just after the position number 8. So yeah, it's nearly the top, but you know, we never have capacity and we need to deliver just tickets for the customer, more value. So it was challenging situations. And we managed to deal on both in different ways, right? One, you will need to understand why people are reacting like that. Especially if you've already worked with them and it's a different behavior, sometimes it may be something that is forcing them to react like that, right? So always think the context is only valid today, right now. Your team tomorrow is going to be different. Everybody here is not going to be the same person tomorrow and today, right? Because every day you're learning something or feeling something different. You can be even more tired, less tired, maybe something on your personal life is happening. So you can have some failed stories, even starting with a good point that is putting the technical debt on the backlog and ensuring that everybody can see it, right? Always communicate. And that's the way we manage to avoid these two scenarios or these two traps, right? So in the case that we have the tech lead that he was always pushing a little bit down the technical dev tickets. After a really, how to say, hot retrospective, we managed to discuss a lot of things. And it got a little bit personal because actually that person was having issues at home, financial issues. And the way that company changed on that year, the bonus, for the tech lead, one of the key things for getting a better bonus, it was to delivering more user stories to customers and not tickets in general. He was in a really bad situation personally. He needed that bonus really badly. So he was pushing to get user stories. He opened himself to the rest of the team. And we understand that it was a bad situation, but it was a bad situation for the team as well. Because if we don't fix technical debt, we're not going to be able to deliver user stories at the end. Because it's going to be that complicated to develop the code that the customers won't be happy. So we managed to have some working agreements on the retrospective. After that discussion, we say, okay, we're going to try to do as much as we can on user stories, but we need to fix the technical debt. So we start agreeing percentage of time to fix technical debt every sprint. So we're starting maybe one person 25% of its time to fix technical debt on one sprint, and the other sprint we were adjusting that on every retrospective, checking, okay, those are the tickets of technical debt that we have fixed. Those are the new ones. It's enough the percentage of time. We were always trying to to ensure that it wasn't biting us too much, the technical debt, that we were actually fixing stuff in a good way, right? One key thing is always show the improvements in your demos. Even if it's technical debt, and sometimes it's the thing that you're fixing is a way that your pipelines they are going to spend less time on the build time, that instead of 3 minutes, it's going to be 2.5 minutes, for example. You can show the graphs on the demo, even if it's only for half a minute or 1 minute. It's something that you can explain and to the rest of the company stakeholders that we have doing that so we can accelerate the way that we are releasing into our test environment and production. And even though it doesn't seem too much, we have reduced it 20% or 25% of time. So it's always good to show the improvements in the demo. And doing that with the working agreements, reviewing and showing improvements in the demo, we managed to get back in track and actually start solving again technical debt, because it was neglected for a couple of sprints for a personal situation. Key thing, you need to communicate with your team and trying to have a little bit of chat about things not related with the office, to feel that we are all humans and we're persons and not someone else that's doing the stuff, right? This is the way that we managed to fix the situation where the tech lead was always pushing back tech dev tickets. We have the other situation when you have the product owner that, knowing that you are marking all the tickets technical dev, that is putting them always a little bit down, just enough for not being picked on the next sprint because we don't have capacity. And sometimes it's not easy to spot that the product owner is doing things like that, right? The key thing for us, it was to change the way that we explained the issues. If you have some technical debt that needs to be fixed, the way that we managed to start fixing them, it was writing stories that needed that technical debt to be fixed. At least on that context with that team, the product owner always wanted everybody to be able to add tickets to the backlog. And then we will review with the product owner and see whether they're important or not. And they could be prioritized, estimated, and so on, right? I remember once we had one ticket that it was to improve how we handle the database concurrent connections, right? Because we had some issues when we have a lot of, well, not quite a lot of users. It was with a medium amount of users. Of course, this ticket was never on top of the backlog to be fixed, because for that context, it was a website about holidays, and at that time, we never had a lot of users getting together on the website to trying to book holidays, right? So for the product owner, we were adding other things like better extras for the holidays or something different. We wanted to modify that from the development team. We thought that it was really important that, especially going forward in the future. So the thing that it's working now, it doesn't mean that it's going to work in a couple of weeks, right? So the way that we did, it was trying to make a story for that, right? So that's the story that we created. As a head of product, I want to enable special sales events in our website, like Black Friday, so that we can increase our revenue. Excuse me. Too much talking. This is a really good story, and it's something that in order to allow that, you need to improve how you handle concurrent connections, right? Because if you want people to be able to book a lot of holidays on your Black Friday, you need to ensure that your system is better. Overall, not only the database, it's the whole website and the impact on the bookings of the database. We created that I don't remember the number of the sprints. Let's say that it was on the sprint number 10, and it was inside the sprint 11, because it was straight to the top, because we explained the technical debt using business value. We explained why it was important to fix it, so we can allow something else that is going to give more value to the customer, so they can have a special sales, and that they can actually get holidays at a better price. But also for the company, we can actually increase our sales on special days like Black Friday or a Christmas event or things like that. So everybody was happy. And of course, that was a successful way, right? I know that sometimes it's really complicated to write technical debt ticket in user story. But if you try to do it with all the tickets related with technical debt, you can find, like the example that I did, some that actually, in order to develop them correctly, you need to fix the technical debt, right? You can get better and better describing things as a user story. You only need to start doing it. And discuss with the rest of the team, with the product owner, how we can make that user story that it will require this. Because it's important for everybody to understand, in order to do that, we need to fix this. So that's going to be part of the solution of a user story, right? So some things that I find useful now after more than 20 years working. I'm not going to calculate my age, but it's a Scout Camp rule. One thing that I always enjoyed more is when I'm adding something on the code, and at the same time, I can actually reduce the number of lines of codes or reducing unused code, because it's getting the code better, right? So I'm always on that mentality. However, keep always in mind to discuss with the team in case there is something that is not right on the codes that you're removing. And what it's helped a lot is to have a code review process that you have someone else or two different team members to check every commit and to ensure whether it's validated and merged or not. Because then if you are going too far like a cowboy, they should stop you doing that, right, on the review. But it's a good mentality to try to reduce and to get the code cleaner than it was before. Of course, if you see something that is generating technical debt without any reasoning or any comment, don't approve it straight away. Challenge on your code review and suggest improvements while reviewing it, even if you're a junior developer. Because one of the key things, sometimes the junior developers, they may be a little bit afraid of pointing out things to do differently for senior developers because, you know, they have more experience than me. My advice always to junior developers is, if you see something that you think is not right, say it, put a comment, right? And say it straight away. So the good way is, like, if you do it, maybe you're right. And the senior developer is going to tell you, you know, actually you're right, I'm going to do it the way. Or maybe you are not right. And actually the good way is how the senior developer was doing it. So the senior developer, she's going to explain to you why is that the way of doing things, and you're going to learn something new. And then the next time that you will do something similar, you know the good way, right? So it's the key thing is always communicate, whether you use the comments on the review code, now Slack or Teams, all the tools that you have to discuss with your team online now, especially. And when we will be collocated again, hopefully in some months, discuss with them, right? The key thing of successful teams is communication. And it's communication in a way that you feel safe to actually challenge ideas or to propose crazy ideas. So when you're on a team that actually you feel you can say anything, maybe your idea is a crazy one and it's not going to change the way that the team works. But maybe your idea is going to make someone else to think and to propose something different. And that maybe is a good idea. I know that sometimes a lot of people is afraid of talking, especially now in these times that we have a lot of video calls or phone calls. If we cannot have video calls, I always try to remind people that even the craziest ideas can be good ones. And the best way is I found one day one image online that made me laugh and think, wow. So if you're afraid of sharing ideas, just remember, someone said in a meeting once, let's make a film with a tornado full of sharks. It's a crazy idea, and I think they have already made 5 or 6 films. And maybe the idea wasn't to do a tornado full of sharks, it was to do a tornado full of something else. It's just a crazy example that if you have with your team that feeling that you can share things like that, then your team can make magic happen because you are a whole team and you can discuss properly with everyone. And that's all the stories that I share. So I'm going to check the Q&A now, the panel. You can ask more questions now. Hope you are enjoying it. So we have a question from Phil. Should technical debt tickets be estimated in the same way as project work, or should there a degree of contingency added as it often reveals further issues? Okay, so the key thing for this question, and the answer is a little bit, it depends on the context. So if you write your technical debt tickets like user stories, like the example that I did, of course, my advice would be estimate in the same way. If you are on a fixed price project, which I don't like, usually they have some contingency, time and budget. The key thing sometimes is to do when we don't know how to fix things and we know that there should be a better way and we have technical debt, is to time box some tickets to perform an investigation. We don't know how to solve this, but let's spend someone on the team a couple of days just investigating the possible options and explaining to the rest of the team what would be the impact of doing, not doing, if there is other ways. And then we can all together to try to imagine how is the estimation of that ticket. When there's a lot of unknowns, I think always doing some investigation of 1 or 2 days, but time box the investigation, don't let the investigation going for days to give more insight. And we have another question from Danielle. Would you advise factoring time in a project for a technical debt audit before embarking on tasks, the project as a whole? Okay, so it's with some customers or some companies that I work for, they have different ways of or different auditors. For some auditors, the technical debt, it cannot be CapEx and then it's out of the project and it's operational cost, because for them it's just fixing stuff. For other audits, if it's a justification of doing that in order to deliver what is inside the project, it can be actually part of the CapEx. So it's part of the resolution of the project. And then usually when you are doing high level estimations, the key thing right now for me is not giving dates or not an estimation, it's just a guess. So you are going to need to adapt and modify what you are able to deliver depending on your technical depth and your tickets and your investigations. So I don't know whether I'm answering properly your question or not, but if you are using waterfall approaches, for sure you will have contingency time and contingency budget for that. If you are using more agile approach, or trying to predict more or less what can be done, it could be part of your backlog, and then you will have some degree of certainty whether you can deliver or not things depending on the velocity of the team. Not sure whether it's answering or not, hope yes. Is there any other question? If you have any other question, please feel free to contact us in Twitter. We'll answer any questions, and I love to have feedback. So if you think that my pace talking was too fast, too slow, that there's something that you didn't like, let me know on Twitter, and I will try to get back to you as quick as possible. And I'm going to give it back to Karen now.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Antonio. It's great to get that insight. So we will be doing a follow-up, so I will send a note out, and like Antonio said, if you've got any feedback or any questions, do let us know. And yeah, thank you very much for joining. I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival. There's lots going on. Check out our website for the rest of our sessions, and yeah, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.